What's up, Digidestins? This is Kyle D, better known as RideMyAvatar, and today we're going to talk about none other than the EX-05 meta. So we're going to take a look, get some notes on it, and see what we can expect, what we're going to be noticing when we get to the format in ourselves, which is our national format. So for the US side. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So first off, we have a total of 256 decks using Digimon CG Guide. So there might be a little bit more data that I'm missing out on, but we kind of got a good gist of what we're seeing here. We have Anubis at 33, Mirage at 20, Purple Garurumon at 19, well, Blue-Purple Garurumon. They kind of mix both decks pretty quickly. Then we have Fang Longmon at 17, Shine Greymon at 15, SOC deck, Red-Black Greymon, Bellastar, Leopardmon, Bloom Hydro Quartz, Leomon, Mugen, Crossheart Jelly, Royal Knights, Leomon, Beelzemon, Metal Edamon, Grace Nova. Finally, it kind of, which is really nice to see that Grace Nova started going up a little bit. Maybe we just need to find the sauce here. But Hunters, Gamamon, Yellow Hybrid, Setcon, Red Hybrid, Balphamon, Alphamon, Blue Flare, Blue-Green Imperial Dramon, Purple Red Mill, Dark Knightmon, Yellow Vaccine, which is surprising to see how quickly this deck volleyed. This deck flopped so bad. After just one set, just changed everything up. Well, the problem also comes down to is yellow is good at setup, but it doesn't have the lethal or control aspect that it needs to right now to be able to handle what's going on in the format. Then you have Mass Day, D-Brigade. Even D-Brigade dropped off fast. Then you have Black Omni, Gallant, Matemon, and then Cerberusmon. So let's take a look at the pie chart itself. We're looking at 12.9% of the meta is Anubismon. Then we have Mirage at 7.8. Then you have 7.4 for Purple Blue Garurumon, Fang Longmon at 6.6. Then you have Shine Greymon at 5.9, and then 4.3, 4.7. 4.3 for Bellastar, Leopardmon 3.9, Bloom Hydro Quartz at 3.1. So this is pretty solid to take a look at. So let's take a look at what the decks are kind of roughing out to look like. First off, the Anubismon deck is definitely just a combination of having the support of Mervamon, being able to spit out so many bodies with retaliation and blocker skills that it just becomes a very much fight for your life situation once Anubismon hits and you have a Mervamon and bodies in grave. This deck just gets really crazy pretty quickly, and the fact that Anubismon can actually play Death Hex at even a reduced cost earlier can be really scary. And the fact that this deck definitely can spit out their blockers, well, the negators like Psychmon and Gaze, if they need to prevent you from Death Hexing or gaining a bunch of memory. This is a deck that can do that very easily because it can cycle back these rookies that are very easily popped and outed in the format. Since Purple has this ability, you're allowed to keep that going. But the deck has its strengths and everything like that. Being able to go wide and not worry about much is really scary for most players to deal with. So it definitely shows up. Then you have Mirage here. Mirage Galga, just basically using the Gomamon plus Zudamon Ace to kind of just, if they're not really ready to completely fully commit, they can go off. The mental trainings definitely help out because that allows you to bring up the Galmon or your Gomamon and half a turn sooner because those mental trainings reduce your champion up, gaining you memory because you bounce stuff. And then boom, all of a sudden your opponent's hand size increased and you're all set, ready to go. And the fact that they have Bokumon that is going to create jamming situations where you now don't have to worry about swinging into security and worrying about magic numbers. Big threats that used to slow this deck down now isn't as big of a problem anymore. So you can just combo off once you have everything ready, and then boom, your opponent is just really having a bad time. So the deck has a lot of potential here. Then let's talk about it. There are two forms of Garurumon going around right now. There is the blue base and then there's the purple. We'll talk about the blue base first and then we'll talk about the purple base. So Blue base is just straight up the old Gabumon stuff. You know, teching in Gabumon X antibody for searching. You know, search. You know, uses thick searching to get their point across. You're going to combo off. You have a shot at with the promo Garurumon to basically OTK this way. You know, all this good stuff with getting the extra security check and then basically applying enough pressure. I mean, using Metal Garurumon Ace to be able to pass back turn on your opponent's turn is very interesting. But what's very unique about this is that the deck has started to tech in, because you are using a purple, you know, level 6 that can Digivolve on any of your level 5s. That means you can use Beelzemon to close out the game gap a little bit better. So you use Beelzemon and then 7-fold cluster, because you're going to be tossing cards anyway. You can get 7-fold clusters in the trash. You go into Beelzemon X, be able to pop something with an effect, and then you can clear some security too, and then boom, you have less to worry about. So it's a possibility on what this deck's going to do in the future, but I'm really seeing a very unique style here right now with the blue. Then we do have purple base, where it just focuses on trashing out everything you got, and then just going for the extensive keeping it your turn, OTKing style. Again, the deck's going to do what it wants to do. Using Garurumon X Antibody is a very much powerful play for this deck, and I wouldn't be surprised on seeing something happen to that card. But it's kind of good to see the Garurumon deck. But then let's talk about the Sovereigns. Sovereigns was a very interesting deck, and a lot of people were undervaluing it at first because Bandai said XYZ. But it ended up being this deck was actually pretty solid. The deck plays like a Megasu style of play. You know, it wants to play the level 5s first, cycling in, using its pieces, and then you get into this extremely powerful boss Digimon that is hard to remove outside of options or in battle combat tricks, which isn't a problem. But if you can take out your opponent's Digimon by making them smaller by your own effects, because you can keep cycling pieces back into the deck, which is massive because it puts the game in a longevity for you, and that's what you kind of want to do. You want to be able to play the deck out. You can basically control the board and just deal. Your opponent has to deal and answer with option removal, which is very lacking in this format, which could be an indicator that we might need to start putting in light removal, something to deal with threats like this. And I think that we might need to start shifting that way. Even though they're kind of bricky, it's good to have option removal in a way that you can answer your opponent's threats. I think that's very much becoming more and more inherent with all these aces coming in, because a removal of an ace with an option means that the option costs less to use. So I think that's vital into what we want to do against it, but I think that's a vital piece of the puzzle that we need. So then Leomon with Balfamon kind of has been the straightforward play. Leomon will definitely become its own deck as of next set, because we have the X antibody, and that deck is just going to go off from there. Being able to board clear almost anything that doesn't have a Digimon effect protection skill is going to be scary. This deck can just go where it wants to. I have no doubt in my mind that this deck has a lot of potential, and I see a lot of players probably trying out this deck when EX-05 drops. So definitely, because it's such an easy budget impulse, a very easy budget deck to increase once you've had these cards for a bit. But nothing too crazy here, and especially it does play the Psychmon and Gazes. It's very useful. Then let's see, we have Bellastar. Bellastar, or Beelzestar, was very interestingly non-existent for a couple metas now. So if you started noticing something here, is that the deck kind of swapped the top end of a Garurumon package into a Beelzestar package, basically using Death X, Beelzemon X, Bellastar. You have Cocytus Breath, you know, a lot of option removal that in a format that nobody is using option removal. Congratulations, a full deck center around that. I think that's very important and very useful, especially if you take in the account of this card alone here, Hollowing Crusher. If that is Hollowing Crusher, I hope. So yeah, with Hollowing Crusher, you can remove the sources of even the peskiest of Garurumon X Antibody. And then you also have ways of removing aces out, so that becomes a free value town here. I mean, the deck can just mill out crazily because of the Garurumon X Antibody, and that is just what we're going to be seeing here from now on, is a lot of purple decks using Garurumon X Antibody until something happens with it. Let's take a look here. Then we have Leopardmon. Didn't really do much performance-wise for a new deck, but as you can see, using Loader, Boncho, you know, it's a Leomon deck. Not Leopard, Leomon. Sorry about that. It's Leomon. Just taking a look at it, you know, a generic list to get you guys wanting to think and build this deck. It had some decent top with Leomon. So definitely a kind of weaker deck all in all, just because of how it plays out. But I think it's probably a little bit slept on. Leopardmon, with Leopardmon X Antibody, definitely changed up how the deck wanted to play. The deck now can spit out consistent bodies and be even more scarier than before. So being able to have two things that can produce body production is nasty, and especially free bodies at that. You can set up to have Lilymon be able to suspend and lock down your opponent's Digimon. You know, all this stuff does add up eventually, and it gets scary pretty quickly. So I think that's really interesting. Very much a underwhelmed deck and performed very weirdly. I think just because of the setup it requires is what's holding it back, is because it is split between two colors that isn't dual color, which I think was the problem here, was it dropped the ball because it wasn't dual color. I think if it was dual color and being able to have more access to the trainings, all those things would have made the deck better, but now you have to rely on memory boosts to set up, which is an extra memory that you give your opponent, and that probably hurts the deck more and more. You could definitely try trainings, but because of the way the deck plays, it gets really hard to do it. But I mean, when it hinges on the back of 8 cards really just going off, that's really the major problem here, is that yes, you can use Flaremon and Lyskimon. These 2 cards will search you consistent pieces, but the problem comes down to is that they will only search if you reveal one of suit and then the other, you don't get the other suit, you're not pulling enough pieces in to justify it. So that becomes the problem here, because they both don't pull just 2 cards, which yes, I get that you have a possibility and you can hit some good options, but the fact that you will be missing out on pieces is what hurts the deck, because you have to rely on these level 4s here to keep your engine going and keeping your hand size. Then you have Filth deck, which is very interesting to me. Using the new Metal Edamon and everything like that, it has a lot of potential, what I'm noticing, but at the end of the day, it does lack the offensive power. It definitely needs a lot more strength to be able to punch through and beat your opponent, and that's just taking time. It has a control option, it has a value to it that makes it really scary to deal with, but because that it doesn't have that game finishing punch yet, you're just more of a slower control deck, in my opinion. And then takeaway notes from this set: Anubis is not broken by itself. What I'm noticing, the fact that Mervamon spits out so many threats is kind of the bigger problem here, and that's just because all of a sudden it goes from 7 to what, a 4 cost or a 3 cost, if I remember Anubismon's skill. Then basically, you know, from there you're just spitting out bodies, and boom, that just becomes really much the problem there. Anubismon's actually quite fair if you take out the Mervamon at the end of the day. Then you have Grace Novamon underperforming even after Bandai's hype for it to be top of the meta, and that's just because it's a setup deck that wasn't designed properly. It should have been a dual color deck and it would have been fine. There was no reductions either with the top end, so you're paying 4 costs regardless of what happens, and that's really hurting the deck. Gurumon X Antibody is an extremely strong card that will be part of future meta decks that makes it overtune in purple and even Apocalyptomon, or, you know, it only gets the Crustmon. So future restrictions may be incoming for that card. You definitely have to watch out. I think that's not something you should be sleeping on, watching that card. So Devas and Leopardmon should not be slept on either. They're both really solid decks. They were definitely pulling ahead when they could, and that just took momentum and fine-tuning of the deck. I think if they had a little bit more time, I think that Devas and Leopard would show more performance, and I wouldn't be surprised. And then first EX set that affected the meta extremely well, with multiple decks topping from the set's design. That's very important to take into. There's been a few metas that, oh yeah, just one or two cards really affected it with their EX, like, you know, Ice Walls and, you know, the Chaos Dramons, stuff like that do matter at the end of the day, but it never really showed many multiple topping decks. I mean, even with EX2, D-Reaper took until Death X was a card to actually present itself extremely well in the format. There's just a lot of things that have to go right with an EX set to make it competitive, and even with Examon being the only deck that kind of just showed up and be competitive in EX3, and then EX4 wasn't too... No. Yeah. EX4? EX4. What was EX4? Oh, Alternate Being. That was a complete flop, if I remember correctly. There wasn't really anything extreme, you know. You had the Jagras, Garurumon, Black Agumon deck. That was a possibility, but didn't do too well. And there wasn't really anything else from that set. It was kind of just a stepping stone set besides Ruin Mode. So it's really good to see that finally decks coming from this set, an EX set, that actually matter in a meta. So it's good to just take the look at that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. What deck are you excited for the EX-05 meta? And without further ado, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.